Good morning. Today we are working on P08. I can add and subtract rational numbers. So we need to remember, what are rational numbers? Who remembers what's the definition of a rational number? Evan?
A positive or negative that can be a decimal fraction.
Yeah, positive or negative numbers that can be a fraction or a decimal that ends or repeats. So we're going to be working with adding and subtracting all of those different types of rational numbers. So first, let's review what we're going to do when we add or subtract different types of rational numbers. You will not be able to use a calculator on the test, but you may use one now to check your answers. So we're going to check answers when we do our homework, but on the test, you won't have that opportunity. So, using integers, when you add, the operation is addition. And when we're using that number line, we move to the right. So an example would be 10 plus 14 equals 24. So we started off at 10, positive 10 on the number line, and we move 14 to the right, and we end at 24. So that's just basic adding with those positive numbers. But now, if we add a negative, our operation that we're using is really subtraction. And we are going to go to the left on the number line. So that would be like saying 10 plus, I'm going to put parentheses there so we can see that negative is with the 14. 10 plus a negative 14 would equal what? Sorry? Negative 4. Because we started at that 10 on the number line, but because it's a negative 14, we have to go to the left. And if we go to the left 14, we end at negative 4. So when we add those negatives, we're really subtracting. The key thing is to remember, think about that number line. You can, on your help sheet, you can write a number line. You can visualize a number line in your head. Always think, which side of the zero am I going to end up on? Is my answer going to be a negative? Because if we had done 10 plus negative 6, we would have ended at a positive 4. So you always have to think, which side of that zero am I going to end on? All right, so let's think about subtracting. Basic positive numbers. We've been subtracting since first grade. So it's just regular subtraction. And we go to the left on that number line. So if we said 10 minus 14, we know we end up at that negative 4. So you look at where you're starting on the number line. You're going to the left if you're subtracting. You end up at negative 4. Gets a little more complicated if we subtract a negative. Subtracting a negative actually turns it to addition. Just like when we added a negative, it was subtraction. When we subtract a negative, it becomes addition. So if it's addition, we're going to the right on the number line. So what that would look like is 10 minus that negative 14. So if you're subtracting a negative number, we actually add it. What would my answer be? What would 10 minus negative 14, looking at, oh, we're changing it to adding. Christina?
Negative 24.
Say say, 11?
24.
That would be a positive 24. So when I look at this, whenever I see 10 minus a negative 14, they put those parentheses around it so you can see that's a negative, not just a minus minus. It looks kind of goofy if we saw 10 minus minus 14. So this is 10 minus a negative 14. When you have those two there, you change it, it's really 10 plus a positive 14. So I just changed minus a negative, I change it to my addition signs and my positive sign. So that helps me remember, oh, minus a negative, I'm actually adding. So I always just write in, add the positive, so I remember that I'm adding there. So let's look at how we're going to use this chart. So you can't use a calculator on the test. Can we put this table on our help sheet? Yeah, we sure can. We can put this table onto our help sheet. So if we look here, negative 7 plus 9, what would my answer be? Negative 7 plus 9, Rocco? 2. Because if I'm looking at a number line, I know here's my 0. If I'm at negative 7 and I'm adding, I know I'm going to the right. So I need to have over 9 places, and I would end at positive 2. What is 13 minus negative 4? Harper? 17. Because I know that minus a negative, I'm actually adding, so it's 13 plus 4. 13 minus a negative 4 is the same as saying 13 plus 4. So whenever you see minus a negative, you can change it to adding that positive. What is negative 5 minus 3? Oop. Negative 8. Because if I'm starting at that negative 8 on the number line and I'm subtracting 3, I'm going to the left on that number line. Any questions? If you want to draw out a number line, you have that whole blank page on your left side, draw a number line to help you. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's look at the bottom of our page. Okay, so why does subtracting a negative change to adding? Seems weird. Why do we just say subtracting a negative is adding a positive? Well, when we subtract, we are finding how far away the two values are on the number line. So an expression like 7 minus a negative 4 is asking how far away are 7 and negative 4 on the number line. The answer is that they are 11 away from each other. So if we think about that number line, here's my 0. If we start at 7, and then we have negative 4, when we subtract, we're saying how far away they are from each other. They are 11 away from each other. If we had 0 minus 4, we're at 0 minus 4. They're 4 away from each other on that number line. Okay, so that's why we turn subtracting a negative into adding, because we're seeing just how far away those two numbers are from each other. So there's a reason for it. It's not just this is the rule, this is what you have to do. There's a reason. Subtraction is telling us how far away they are. Any questions about that? All right, let's look at our second page. Decimals. Stack the decimals vertically, making sure the decimal points are in a column. Add or subtract the columns, pairing or borrowing when necessary, and drop your decimal point straight down. So we're not going to do mental math, just saying, oh, 7 plus 1, or 7.1 plus 12.6, I'm going to do the math in my head. No, I want you to actually rewrite it. 1 plus 6 is 7, bring that decimal place straight down, 7 plus 2 is 9, 1 plus nothing is 1. Okay, show your work. Show your work, and then you can check it with the calculator. Can we check it with the calculator on the test?
No.
No, because if you're using a calculator, you're not showing me that you know what you're doing. So we're gonna show what we know. Let's make sure we're all on the second page right now. So some are adding, some are subtracting. Know that they're mixed in there. On the test, I'm gonna tell you right now, I always have a couple of kids that forget to look at what operation they're supposed to be doing. And if it says subtract, they accidentally add because they think the first two are adding, the second two are subtracting, and they just go with it instead of paying attention. Always check what operation you should do. Any questions on the decimals? Eleanor?
I have a question about the last page about the calculator. Is there negatives on the calculator?
I would have to look at your calculator. All right, fractions. If you have a mixed number, first you have to convert it to its improper fraction. There are a lot of us who forgot to do that when we were doing our entrance exam. Okay, you were just adding or subtracting those fractions and then forgot that you had to work with that whole number also. So make sure mixed numbers you convert to those improper fractions. Then use equivalent fractions to get a common denominator. Adding or subtracting fractions always have to have a common denominator. Whatever you multiply the bottom by, you multiply the top by. And then we add or subtract those numerators. The denominators stay the same. So your denominators, when we add or subtract fractions, must be the same. Double caution, add or subtract the numerators only. Okay, we don't add or subtract that denominator. Denominator stays the same. What are we going to have to remember to do as our final step? We're working with fractions. What's our final step going to be? Ruby? Simplify. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. It's okay if your final answer is improper. You can change it to a mixed number or you can leave it improper as long as it's simplified. Your final answer must be simplified. Reduce it down as far as you can go. Okay? So let's look at our first one. 2/12 plus 5/6. How would I do that? Baby?
You make the 6 or 5 by multiplying it by 2.
I want to have a 12 as that common denominator. To get that, I multiplied it by 2. So I keep my 2 12s. That already has the 12 as my denominator. 6 times 2 is 12. 5 times 2 is 10. What's my next step? Claire?
Add the numerators.
Add the numerators. What's 2 plus 10?
12.
12. My denominator stays the same. Hadley? You can't simplify it. What is 12 over 12, Rocco? 1. I can divide 12 out of 12 one time. My final answer is 1. 12 over 12 is not the final answer. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Eleanor?
So I can also say it as 1 over 1, because that's what simplified is.
Mm-mm. It would be 1. Because when we simplify, we see how much we can divide out. If it's 1 over 1, I can still divide a 1 out. So your answer would be a whole number. I can take 1 away from 1 time. So you would give me a whole number for that one. Usually, you'll have a numerator and denominator, but when you have a number like that, 12 over 12, your final answer would just be 1. Okay? What do I do with my next one? 1 3/4 minus 5/8. What's my first step? Heather,
make the mixed number into a proper fraction.
make the mixed number an improper fraction. How do I do that? How do I turn a mixed number into an improper fraction? One person knows out of this whole class? Ah, that's what I thought. Harper, how do I do it?
You multiply 4 times 1,
I multiply that denominator by the whole number,
and then add.
and then I add my numerator. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. That denominator stays the same, minus 5/8. Now can I subtract them? No, what's my next step, Luke? Beckett,
Don't you have to multiply 4 by 2
why would I multiply 4 by 2, Beckett?
to make the denominator the same?
I want that common denominator. I can keep 5/8 as 5/8, and I can turn that 4 into a 4 times 2 will become that 8. What goes on the top?
You have to multiply the same thing.
Whatever I multiply the bottom by, I multiply the top by. So 7 times 2 is 14. So what is 14/8 minus 5/8, LJ?
208.
You jumped ahead of me. What is 14/8 minus 5/8? Go back a step. Remember, we're subtracting. So what would it be if we subtract? What's 14 minus 5? 9. So 14 and 9, what do I do with the denominator? It stays the same. So 14 and 9/8. So always check. We know that they are mixing in those adding and subtractings. Always, always, always double check your operation that you're supposed to do. You can leave it at 9/8. You can leave it improper, or you can change it to a mixed number. What would our mixed number be? Amala? 1 and 1/8. I can take the 8 out of the 9 one time, and I'm left with 1/8 left. I would accept either answer, improper or mixed number, as long as it's correct. Okay? Always double check, am I adding or subtracting? Any questions on this part? All right, let's look and see what's under this.
That's all it's going to be.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
That's our last section, is adding and subtracting those fractions. So if there's no further questions, if you are watching this from home, I hope you are well, and I hope to see you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.